Hey, fifth grade. Obviously, we're talking a little bit differently today, but what I can do real quick is just remind you all that from the other day, we had just wrapped up this conversation about all of our questions related to these maps and pictures and all the stuff related to the Sphinx and all these things about building the pyramid. So we've moved on from that. And like I told you all on Friday, we're going to start talking about hieroglyphics. So we're going to keep with that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Rosetta Stone real quick together right now. And then in class, you all have a paper that you're going to get that goes along with these particular questions. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what I want you to do with those questions and with those answers here when we get to it. Okay. So this conversation about the Rosetta Stone is going to happen right now today. And then also these, what I call the quick read questions. Okay. So what you need for this is obviously you need a notebook to be open. And I know from Friday, some of you all already started this off. So you might have already written the who, what, where, when type of stuff. But let's just imagine that you didn't. Okay. So somewhere on a notebook page, and again, feel free to pause this at any point, but you need to just put the title Rosetta Stone. And I'm going to talk to you about what it is and then obviously the importance of it. Okay. So the first thing, the Rosetta Stone, it obviously has a two-part name. The obvious part is that it is a rather large stone. Okay, so it's this big slab over here. Obviously, at one point, it was probably more rectangular, but different parts have kind of fallen off, like the top corner and the bottom corner right here. Um, why it's known as the Rosetta Stone is because it was discovered near a town that is kind of affectionately known as Rosetta, Egypt. So let's get into what all this information is talking about, and let's get into why I have three little zoomed in parts here. And we'll talk about how this actual stone is the only reason that we have any clue what Egyptian hieroglyphics look like. Okay. So, first of all, the who. Well, the who on here is who actually discovered it. Okay. So, during the late 1700s, there was a French campaign um, to kind of go around different parts of the world and obviously conquer different lands and different things going on like that. And the leader of the group that some people have at least heard of before is Napoleon. Okay, so this is around the time of Napoleon, and the French are over in Egypt and they're just pretty much looking around. They're not necessarily on archaeological digs, so to speak, but they are looking for different things or artifacts of historical importance while they're also kind of marching around doing their military thing. And one of the soldiers in Napoleon's army actually just kind of almost trips on this thing. Okay. And when I say trip on it, I mean that it was barely sticking out on the ground. Okay. There was just like one part of it and he looked at it and thought, okay, what in the world is this? So as they began to dig, they realized that it was this big slab of stone. They didn't think much of it, but they knew that with all this crazy writing on it, it had to be of some kind of importance. Okay, so they wanted to hang on to it. Now, unfortunately for them, they don't hang on to it very long because of all the different wars that are going on and because of all the different changing of territories. The French don't really have it for very long. It eventually falls into the hands of the British. Okay, and even to the day, or even to this day, it is in a British museum. Okay, so the French are the people who find it. The British are the ones eventually who kind of claim it. Now, the what is just how big it is. Okay, I wanted you guys to know like what it is, and it's obviously a 4 foot by 2 foot piece of what a lot of people think is basalt stone. It's a very black stone, very dark stone. And as you can tell, 4 foot by 2 foot is not super huge, but it's pretty decent size. Okay, so it's about 4 foot tall by only about two rulers wide. Okay, so it's only about 2 feet across. So, um, the where again we talked about, basically, it's in Rosetta, Egypt. The when is about 1799, and the why in the translation is what we're going to get into now. Okay, why? The why is it important? Okay, well, this is very simply put, but without it, we would never have been able to read Egyptian hieroglyphics like at all. Okay, because obviously the use of hieroglyphics had been kind of a dead language for many, many years. So there wasn't like a couple of people that still were around that could be like, "Oh yeah, I know what it means." There just wasn't. Okay. And many of you all that are into Egyptian stuff or know Egyptian stuff, these hieroglyphics look very familiar to you, right? So there's a bunch of different symbols, and there's many different birds or snakes, or like an eyeball, or like a shepherd's crook, or any kind of different images. Okay, but they were pretty, they looked neat, they were cool. However, nobody knew how to read them up to this point. Okay, now that's the big important message on this. Without this particular artifact, we would have no clue what hieroglyphics mean. This is it. Now, the how do you think archaeologists translated it is what we have going on right here. Okay, now, I could let you guys think about this, but I feel like at some point somebody's going to come up with it really quick, and others are just going to stare at it and go, well, I don't know. All right, so we might as well just kind of look at it. Now, I think you can notice, based on the lines that are on here and the fact that I have a zoomed in area, that there are three sections to this particular stone. Now, what's interesting is all three of them are saying the same thing. Okay, it's actually like basically one story written in three different languages. Okay, and what's actually written on here is a story about a different battle and all kinds of different things, but it's that same story of the battle and what was going on that's repeated three different ways. So how do they figure this out? Well, first of all, I will tell you all, it takes about 10 years. So this thing does not really get fully translated until about 10 years later. And what's going on is basically that everybody, even still to that point, even still today, knows Greek. Okay. So they knew Greek and they could read Greek. So they could read the bottom section. So that wasn't a problem. The middle section is known as demotic or demotic. Some people kind of could understand still, but this was like the everyday language of Egypt. And again, some people knew it, some people didn't. And then you had hieroglyphic, which nobody knew. Okay, so what do? Well, they work backwards essentially, and they reverse engineer this thing. So they interpret the Greek, so they write the story out in the Greek, and they use what they knew about demotic to kind of go backwards and figure out different parts of it. Okay, so they use the Greek to figure out the demotic. And then basically they're going to use the Greek to figure out the demotic and use the Greek and demotic to figure out the hieroglyphs. Okay, so they can finally nail down like, okay, this bird equals this letter or symbol, or this snake equals whatever mouth sound. Okay, so it was a very tedious, a very long process, right? But that's basically how they do it, and that's how we know hieroglyphs today. They take the same story, right? They knew it was the same story once they got kind of rolling here. They knew that this was the story in Greek, so then they back it up and try to figure out what some of this stuff means in Demotic, which again, Demotic was kind of the everyday language of Egypt, and hieroglyph would have been the super fancy or super rare. So these are both Egyptian types of language, but the Demotic is more kind of everyday language versus totally obviously like religious or like super fancy hieroglyphic. But anyway, so that's the rundown on the Rosetta Stone so far, right? So essentially, for your notebook, I hope you at least have the bare minimum here. And obviously, you want to write down how they translated it, which is again, they translated it by reading the Greek and then figuring out the other two languages by kind of going backwards. Okay, now for what you guys are going to do next, right? There should be a paper that you're going to receive that goes with this information. And what I want you all to do as best as possible. If you can do this on the same paper, if you need to do this on piece of filler paper or notebook paper that's going to get pulled out, I want to make sure that you guys have the questions and the answers on whatever you turn in. Okay, so if you're going to do it on the back of the paper, like if you feel like you can fit it on there, then I want you to physically write the question along with the answer. Okay, if you're going to do it on notebook paper and turn the notebook paper in, that's the same deal. Write the question and then write the answer as well. Okay, so let me just go through these real quick, and you guys can obviously start reading to find your answers and get wrapped up here. But as far as hieroglyphics, what are they is obviously very specifically defined in the reading. You guys can also add your little flavor to it if you want to explain in your own words as well, but I also want the straight up information from the reading. Number 2, same deal. What is complicated about them? Well, you can just look at them and maybe think of an answer for that, but I also want you to read into the information about what is complicated. Okay? We know that it was complicated prior to this because nobody knew what they said until they figured out the Rosetta Stone. So that was obviously complicated itself. But even now, knowing what the images mean, there's still some complexities to it that I want you to figure out. Okay, number 3, this is an interesting one. Who could use them? Not just Egyptians, right? And when I say that, I don't mean every Egyptian, but there's certain people that would have understood hieroglyphics and or known what they meant. Okay. What was papyrus? I think some of y'all know that it is a form of paper, early paper, kind of, but you're going to want to be more specific. And then they go in for number 5, where would papyrus grow? So that's going to be important to obviously the region. And then 6, why did Egyptians write in hieroglyphics? We want to know why they use them in the first place. Okay, it wasn't just necessarily a language and that was their language, because it wasn't. But why did they use them? Okay, and then 7 again is talking about papyrus. How was the papyrus made and what colors of ink were used? Okay, now again, for this information, if you guys are writing it all on the back of the page, I'm going to want you to turn the whole page in with your name on it. If you're just going to do it on filler, same deal. Write all the questions and answers on the filler, but make sure you include your name, of course. All right. So tomorrow you guys are going to get a little bit more of an in-depth uh, look at these hieroglyphics. We could talk about them. You guys are going to try to use them, but we'll see how it goes because obviously they're a little tricky to draw or a little tricky to work with. So we'll see how it works. All right. So for today, you guys are good. Hope everybody stays safe, be well, and I'll talk to you very soon. All right. Bye.